They say blood is thicker than water, but they don't tell you that sometimes blood can drown you. I was on my knees scrubbing my own blood from the white Persian rug when I realized I had become less than human in my own home. The metallic taste lingered in my mouth, a piece of my tooth somewhere under the couch, but what hurt more was my stepsister Savannah's laughter upstairs as she uploaded her perfect life to Instagram while I bled below. My name is Emma, and this is how I learned that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let everything burn. It started like any Saturday morning in our Atlanta suburb home. At 25, I paid half the rent and utilities but was treated like hired help. My stepmother Eleanor made that clear from the day she married my father, and even clearer after he died 3 years ago, leaving me legally bound to a lease I couldn't afford to break. I was dusting the coffee table when my elbow caught a water glass. It tipped, spilling half a cup onto the hardwood floor. Not the rug, not the furniture. Just a small puddle that would take 30 seconds to wipe. I didn't have time to reach for a towel. Savannah descended the stairs in her designer dress, and Christian Louboutin heels to $1,000 she never stopped talking about, constantly posting them to her 50,000 Instagram followers. She saw the spill. Our eyes met. I opened my mouth to apologize, to explain, to make myself smaller and quieter like I always did. Without breaking stride, without changing expression, Savannah kicked me directly in the jaw with her pointed heel. The sound wasn't a crack, it was harder, sharper, more final. The sound of my tooth breaking. I collapsed, hand flying to my mouth as pain exploded through my skull. Blood poured between my fingers, spattering onto Eleanor's pristine white rug. I looked up at Savannah, waiting for shock or horror. Instead, she stared at her shoe with pure annoyance. "Oh my God, Emma! Your blood got on my $2,000 Louboutins. Do you know how hard these are to clean?" I couldn't speak. My mouth was full of blood and broken enamel. I knelt there watching my blood soak into the expensive rug, feeling like I was outside my own body. Eleanor walked in with wine. It was barely 10 in the morning, but day drinking had become her norm. She surveyed the scene coldly, her gaze moving from the blood on the rug to my face. "Clean up this disgusting mess right now," she said, voice ice cold. "You and your blood. And get on your knees and clean Savannah's shoes. That's the only position you're worthy of in this house." She threw a floor cloth at my face, hitting my nose. "When you're done, you owe Savannah for professional shoe cleaning. I'll add it to your rent." Savannah was already back on her phone, angling for the perfect selfie, completely unbothered that she'd knocked out my tooth. I gathered the cloth with shaking hands and started wiping my own blood. Nobody helped. Nobody called a doctor. Nobody asked if I was okay. Something inside me that had been bending for years finally started to crack. After cleaning every trace of blood with a toothbrush, because Eleanor insisted, after polishing Savannah's heel while she held her foot out like a princess expecting tribute, I finally made it to the bathroom. I locked the door and examined myself. My jaw was swelling, turning purple. My lateral incisor was gone, broken at the gum line. A piece came out when I spit into the sink, white and sharp against the porcelain. I should have cried, but I'd run out of tears long ago. Instead, I stared at this 25-year-old woman who had become a ghost in her own life. I worked 2 jobs with $40,000 in student loan debt. My 15-year-old Honda needed a new transmission I couldn't afford. Meanwhile, Savannah drove a brand new Mercedes G-Wagon Eleanor bought her for her 21st birthday. I paid half the mortgage, bought groceries, paid utilities, cleaned, cooked, and maintained a house where I wasn't even allowed to have friends over because Eleanor said my type of people didn't fit the neighborhood aesthetic. Today, my stepsister had kicked my tooth out because I spilled water, and my stepmother told me I deserved it. I wrapped the tooth fragment in tissue and put it in my pocket. Evidence, though I didn't yet know what for. Something had to change. I wouldn't keep living like this. The next day at the Peach Pit Diner where I'd worked 3 years, my boss Brenda took one look at my swollen face and narrowed her eyes. "What happened to your jaw?" "I fell," I said automatically. "Uh-huh." She didn't look convinced. "You're on soup and sandwich station today." During my break, eating soup slowly in the back kitchen, Brenda found me. She closed the door and sat across from me. "Listen, honey, I've been watching you for months. I see the bruises you cover up. I see how you flinch when someone raises their voice. I see you're always eating soft food like chewing hurts." I opened my mouth to protest, but she held up her hand. "I'm not asking you to tell me anything you're not ready to tell, but family isn't always home. Sometimes family is the most dangerous place you can be." She pulled out a folded paper from her apron. "There's a place downtown called Haven House, a resource center for women in crisis. Free legal counsel, housing help, no judgment. I volunteer there twice a month." She pressed it into my hand. "Don't let them destroy you, Emma. You're worth more than they've convinced you you're worth." "I don't know if I can," I whispered. "You can. And when you're ready, you will. Just keep that paper. Promise me." "I promise." "Good. Now start keeping a record of everything. Pictures, dates, times, everything. You're going to need it." I went home that night with the paper burning a hole in my pocket and Brenda's words echoing in my head. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than despair. I felt anger. Clean, clarifying anger. But I wasn't ready to act. Not quite. I needed one more push. That push came 2 weeks later when I found Eleanor and Savannah in my bedroom, throwing my belongings into garbage bags. "What are you doing?" I asked, voice higher than intended. Eleanor turned with her cold smile. "Darling, we're doing you a favor. This house needs to maintain a certain image, and frankly, your things are bringing down the aesthetic." Savannah picked up my work sneakers between 2 fingers. "Ew, these are so gross. The smell of poverty and failure is literally polluting the air." She was recording. Her phone was propped on my dresser, filming for her Instagram story. She grabbed my only dress flats and tossed them in the bag. "Spring cleaning, getting rid of negative energy. #clean home, #positive vibes." Something inside me snapped. 3 years of bending, apologizing, making myself smaller, and they were literally throwing away my belongings while filming it for entertainment. I lunged forward and grabbed the bag. "Those are my shoes. I need them for work." Eleanor moved fast. She grabbed my wrist and shoved me hard. I stumbled backward and fell, my back hitting the bed frame before sliding to the floor. "Don't you dare touch me with your filthy hands. You are trash, Emma, and your things are trash. The sooner you accept your place, the happier everyone will be." Savannah kept recording, getting every moment. She was smiling. I sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by garbage bags, and something fundamental shifted inside me. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was cold, calculated, and done. That night, after they'd gone to their rooms, I sat on my stripped bed and took out my phone. For 2 weeks since Brenda gave me that paper, I'd been recording. Not video too risky, but audio. My phone in my pocket, on my dresser, in my apron, constantly recording. I had hours of material. Eleanor's drunken rants, Savannah's casual cruelty, the sound of my tooth breaking. I opened the voice memo app and listened to earlier tonight. Eleanor's voice, crystal clear. "You are trash, Emma, and your things are trash." I had evidence. Real, undeniable evidence. I pulled out the paper from Haven House and made the call. The woman who answered was calm and professional. I told her everything. Not the sanitized version with excuses, but the truth. The abuse, the financial exploitation, the assault that broke my tooth. "Can you come in tomorrow?" Yes, I can." After hanging up, I sat in darkness and smiled for the first time in years. It hurt my damaged mouth, but I didn't care. I took a marker and wrote on the wall behind my dresser where no one would see. They called me trash. Let's see how trash buries them alive. The next morning, I drove to Haven House. Inside was warm and welcoming, with soft lighting and comfortable furniture. The intake coordinator Sandra played my recordings. Her expression grew serious with each clip. "Emma, what you're describing is domestic abuse, physical assault, financial exploitation, emotional abuse. You don't have to tolerate this. You're 25 and on the lease. You have legal standing." She introduced me to Marcus, a volunteer lawyer who listened while taking notes. "Here's the situation. You're on the lease, so you have as much right to live there as they do. We can help you file a restraining order if you want to stay, or help you break the lease and find new housing if you want to leave. What do you want?" "I want to leave, but I want to make sure they can't come after me for rent." "We can do that. With your recordings and photos of your injuries, we can demonstrate the living situation was uninhabitable due to domestic violence. That's grounds for lease termination in Georgia." Over 2 weeks, I built my case. I photographed my broken tooth, documented every bruise, every incident, every dollar I'd contributed. I opened a new bank account Eleanor couldn't access. I got a P.O. box. And I started apartment hunting. I found a studio in Cabbagetown, an artsy Atlanta neighborhood the complete opposite of Eleanor's suburban prison. An old converted warehouse with exposed brick and industrial windows, 400 square feet, but mine, $800 a month, less than I was paying Eleanor. It represented something I hadn't had in years, freedom. But escaping wasn't enough. They'd spent 3 years grinding me down, treating me as worthless, taking my money and labor and dignity. They'd filmed my humiliation for social media. I wanted them to understand what they'd done. I wanted consequences. Eleanor's entire identity was built on her blog, Eleanor's Gracious Living. 40,000 followers and partnerships with home decor brands, kitchen companies, lifestyle products. Her whole persona was the perfect Southern hostess, the gracious matriarch running a beautiful home with love and elegance. It was all a lie. I created an anonymous email using a VPN. Then I compiled a 5-minute audio package, carefully edited to showcase Eleanor at her worst. Her drunk rants, her cruel insults. Telling me I was trash, worthless, ruining her home with my existence. I juxtaposed these with screenshots from her blog. Posts about parenting with love and grace. Articles about creating a home filled with kindness. Sponsored content about building a family legacy of compassion. The contrast was devastating. I wrote, "This is the truth behind Eleanor's gracious living. The woman you follow, whose advice you trust, whose products you buy, treats her stepdaughter like an animal. She profits from a lie. You deserve to know who you're supporting." I sent it to every brand partner listed on her blog. I hit send at 3 a.m. while they slept peacefully. Then I went to bed. The explosion started the next morning. I was at the diner when notifications started buzzing. The first brand responded on Twitter. "We at Magnolia Home Goods are committed to family values and ethical partnerships. We have terminated our relationship with Eleanor's Gracious Living effective immediately." 3 more followed within an hour. By lunch, it was a full retreat. Companies distanced themselves, issuing statements about commitment to kindness and respect. The real damage happened in Eleanor's private Facebook group, Gracious Southern Mothers, with 12,000 members. Someone leaked the audio there. The group tore itself apart. Mothers who'd followed Eleanor's advice, bought her recommended products, trusted her guidance were furious. The group imploded in 48 hours. Members left in droves. The moderators shut it down. I watched with detached satisfaction. This was just the first domino. My stepsister's life was built on Instagram. 50,000 followers, sponsored posts, carefully curated aesthetic of designer clothes and luxury lifestyle. She was an influencer, or pretended to be, but I knew something her followers didn't. Most of her followers were fake. She'd been buying them for years using bot services. Her engagement was mostly fake too. I'd noticed months ago. The ratio was wrong. 50,000 followers should generate thousands of likes, hundreds of comments. Savannah got maybe 200 likes and a dozen comments, mostly from other small influencers in engagement pods. I spent 3 days using free online tools analyzing her account, websites that detected fake followers, identified bot behavior, analyzed engagement patterns. I compiled everything into a detailed report with graphs, statistics, and comparisons. Then I created a website, simple WordPress with professional template. I called it the Influencer Authenticity Project, with a mission statement about promoting transparency in influencer marketing. I posted Savannah's analysis. I didn't name her directly, but included screenshots with username blurred and enough details that anyone following Atlanta influencers would know exactly who. A fashion influencer based in suburban Atlanta, with approximately 50 Kelvin's followers. The report was damning. 70% of her followers were likely fake. Her engagement rate was less than 1%, far below industry standard. Her comments were filled with generic praise from obvious bots. I sent the link to 3 Instagram call-out accounts specializing in exposing influencer fraud, and a blogger running a website about influencer marketing scams. They ran with it immediately. Within 24 hours, Atlanta influencer exposed for buying followers trended in local social media. The blogger wrote a full article with additional research. The call-out accounts posted, and followers flooded Savannah's page. Comments turned vicious. "How many likes are real? Imagine being so desperate you buy followers. This is why we can't trust influencers." Instagram's algorithm noticed. Her account was flagged for suspicious activity. Her engagement dropped further as the platform suppressed her content. I watched her follower count drop. 50,000 became 48. Then 45. Then 40. People unfollowed in droves. The brands sending her free products stopped responding. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. Not cruel exactly, though I knew this was ruthless. But powerful. In control. Finally, fighting back. I had 1 week before moving to my new apartment. 1 week left in my prison. And one more thing to do. I came home Tuesday evening to pack my last belongings. The house was dark. Eleanor's car and Savannah's G-Wagon were there, but only the living room light was on. I let myself in quietly. The house felt different now. Where it once felt imposing and cold, it just felt empty. Eleanor sat in the living room in darkness, a wine bottle not, a glass in the coffee table. Savannah was on the couch, laptop open, eyes red from crying. They looked up when I entered. Their expressions were so different from what I'd seen for 3 years. Eleanor looked hollowed out, diminished. Savannah looked furious and desperate. "You," Eleanor slurred. "You did this. You destroyed everything." I set my bag down and looked at her calmly. I didn't destroy anything. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see what was already rotting in the dark. Savannah jumped up, laptop crashing to the floor. "You're jealous. You've always been jealous of me. You could never have what I have." I actually laughed. Sharp and humorless, but genuine. "You're right, Savannah. Thank God for that. I'll never live a hollow fake life where I buy validation 1 follower at a time. I'll never pretend to be someone I'm not for free makeup." "You ruined me," Savannah said through tears. "Everyone's laughing at me. All my friends stopped talking to me. I lost everything." "You ruined yourself. I just showed people the truth. If you'd been real from the beginning, there'd be nothing to expose." Eleanor stood unsteadily. "How dare you? You lived in our house, ate our food, and this is how you repay us." "Your house?" I pulled out my phone, opening my banking app and turning the screen toward her. These are my bank statements. Every rent payment for 3 years. Every utility bill. Every grocery purchase. I paid my share and more. I was never your charity case. I was your victim. I reached into my bag and pulled out a wrapped box, setting it on the coffee table. I brought you both a gift. A parting present. Savannah reached for it hesitantly, pulling off the ribbon and tearing the paper. Inside were her Christian Louboutin heels, the ones she'd kicked me with, the ones that broke my tooth. But they weren't pristine anymore. I'd taken a hammer to them. The heels were snapped off, leather torn, signature red soles scratched beyond recognition. Attached inside was a note. You taught me to know my place. Now let me return the favor. Welcome to rock bottom. Savannah's scream was satisfying in a way I probably shouldn't admit. She threw the box across the room, broken shoes tumbling onto the floor. Eleanor started toward me, hand raised to hit me. I didn't move. I'm recording this conversation. I've been recording everything for weeks. You touch me, I press charges. You threaten me, I press charges. You send me a nasty text, I press charges. My lawyer is eager to take this to court if needed. Eleanor's hand dropped. For the first time in 3 years, I saw fear in her eyes. I'm moving out this weekend. My lawyer filed paperwork to remove me from the lease. You're welcome to come after me for rent, but given the documented domestic abuse, I don't think that'll work well. And if you try, all those recordings go to the police. I picked up my bag and walked toward the stairs. At the bottom step, I turned back. You know the saddest part? I would have loved you both if you'd let me. I would have been the best sister, the best daughter. But you decided I was worthless, so you treated me as worthless. Now you get to live with the consequences. Eleanor's face crumpled. Emma, please. We can fix this. Start over. No, we really can't. Goodbye. I went upstairs, packed my last belongings, and walked out for the final time. I didn't look back. There was nothing there but ghosts and bad memories. The next months were hard in unexpected ways. Leaving an abusive situation doesn't make trauma evaporate. I had nightmares, anxiety attacks at the grocery store running into Eleanor's social circle. I jumped at loud noises, flinched when people moved quickly. But I also had freedom. Real, tangible freedom. My studio in Cabbagetown was small and drafty. My upstairs neighbor played bass at 2 a.m., but it was mine. Nobody could enter my space and tell me I was worthless. Nobody could throw away my belongings or tell me I didn't deserve to exist. I kept both jobs, saving every penny. I got my tooth fixed with a crown costing $800 on a payment plan. I started therapy through Haven House's sliding scale program. And I started writing. At first just for me, processing everything that happened, making sense of years of normalized abuse. But Brenda encouraged me to submit my story to a magazine. People need to hear this. They need to understand abuse doesn't always look like they think. I spent 3 weeks polishing my story, ensuring every detail was accurate, every emotion true. I titled it, My Home Was Built on Lies and Louboutin Heels, and submitted to The Cut, an online magazine publishing personal essays about women's experiences. They accepted it within a week. The essay was published on a Thursday morning in late October. By evening, it had been shared 10,000 times. By weekend, it was viral. My inbox exploded with messages from other women who'd experienced similar abuse. Daughters scapegoated by step-parents. People financially exploited by family claiming to love them. Anyone made to feel worthless in their own home. A literary agent reached out. Have you thought about writing a book? This story could be the foundation for something really important. I had thought about it. During sleepless nights, I'd been filling notebooks with observations about family trauma, toxic social media positivity, the particular hell of being abused by people supposed to protect you. Yes, I told the agent. I want to write a book. It took 8 months to write the first draft. I worked at the diner during the day and wrote at night, laptop balanced on my tiny kitchen table, my neighbor's bass providing oddly comforting soundtrack. The book wasn't just my story, it explored family trauma, domestic abuse, financial exploitation, and performative culture allowing abusers to hide behind Instagram filters and blog posts about gracious living. The agent sold it to a publisher for enough money that I could quit my second job. Not the diner, though. Brenda and the regulars had become my real family. Meanwhile, Eleanor and Savannah's lives fell apart completely. I didn't seek information about them, but it was hard to avoid in Atlanta. Eleanor lost all brand partnerships, her blog died, the Facebook group never recovered. Without influencer income, she couldn't maintain her lifestyle. She sold the big suburban house and downsized to a townhouse in a less prestigious neighborhood. Savannah's influencer career was dead and buried. She tried rebuilding with a new account, claiming she'd learned and wanted to be authentic, but nobody bought it. The internet has a long memory. I ran into her 9 months after moving out. I was in a Cabbagetown coffee shop, working on book revisions, when I looked out the window and saw her across the street, wearing a Target polo and khaki pants. Working retail as a cashier, the Savannah I'd known would have rather died than work retail. Now here she was, scanning groceries for $8 an hour, carefully manicured nails chipped, designer clothes replaced with polyester uniform. Our eyes met through the window, just for a second. I saw recognition flash across her face, followed by shame. She looked away quickly, face flushing red, and turned back to her register. I felt something in that moment, but not savage satisfaction. Something quieter, more complex. Closure, maybe. Or peace. I'd spent 3 years believing what they told me. That I was worthless. That I was trash. That I should be grateful for scraps of dignity. Now, looking at Savannah through that window, I realized their judgment was never about me. It was about them, their insecurity and emptiness, projected onto the nearest target. I wasn't trash. I'd never been trash. I was a survivor who finally learned to fight back. I took a sip of coffee and went back to my laptop, to the chapter I was revising. Savannah's life was her own now. I had my own life to build, my own story to tell. The book came out the following spring. We titled it Beneath the Filter, a memoir of abuse, survival, and the lies we tell on social media. The cover was striking, a split image of a perfect Instagram feed on one side and messy reality on the other. The launch was surreal. My publisher organized a reading at an Atlanta bookstore. I was terrified nobody would show. Instead, the place was packed. Women of all ages filled every seat, stood along walls, sat on the floor. Brenda was in the front row beaming. Sandra and Marcus from Haven House came. Even regular customers from the diner showed up. I read the first chapter about the broken tooth and the Christian Louboutin heel, and I saw recognition on so many faces. These women understood. They had their own versions of this story. During Q&A, a young woman in her early 20s raised her hand. How did you know when it was time to leave? How did you know you weren't overreacting? I thought carefully before answering. You know you're not overreacting when you start hiding who you are to survive, when you're afraid in your own home, when you've normalized violence and cruelty to the point where you think it's just how families work. If you're asking that question, if you're wondering if it's bad enough to leave, then it's probably bad enough. The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. After the reading, she showed me bruises on her arms. We stood in that bookstore 20 minutes while I gave her Sandra's number and helped her make a safety plan. That moment, more than the book deal or viral essay or any external validation, was when I understood why I'd written this story. Not for revenge, though revenge was satisfying, but to create a roadmap for other people trapped in situations like mine, to tell them escape was possible. They deserved better. They weren't crazy for wanting more than abuse disguised as family. The book did well, not blockbuster bestseller, but well enough that I could afford a better apartment, pay off student loans, and cut back to part-time at the diner. I did a small book tour, mostly in the South, talking to women's groups and domestic violence organizations. Every event was packed with people who had similar stories, who needed to hear they weren't alone. I started getting interview requests. Local news, podcasts, online magazines. Everyone wanted to discuss the social media aspect, how Eleanor and Savannah used online platforms projecting an image completely opposite their reality. This is the dark side of influencer culture. One interviewer said, "It's not just influencer culture," I replied. "It's deeper. It's about how we value appearance over reality, how we reward people for looking good rather than being good. Social media just made it easier to monetize the lie." The book led to more opportunities. I was invited to write articles about family estrangement, financial abuse, the particular vulnerability of adult children trapped in toxic family systems by economic necessity. I became, somewhat accidentally, a voice for people silenced by shame and social pressure. Through it all, I kept going to therapy. Leaving was just the first step. Healing from years of abuse took work, real work that couldn't be rushed. My therapist, Dr. Chen, who specialized in trauma, helped me understand patterns I'd learned. How I'd learned to make myself small, anticipate others' moods, apologize for existing. How I'd learned love was something earned through suffering rather than freely given. "You're rewriting your understanding of what relationships should look like, Doctor," Chen told me. "That takes time. Be patient with yourself." Being patient with myself was harder than expected. I'd catch myself apologizing excessively for minor things, flinching when someone raised their voice in normal conversation, freezing up when anyone criticized me. Trauma responses were embedded deep, surfacing at unexpected moments. But slowly, incrementally, I started changing. I started believing, really believing, that I deserved respect. That my boundaries mattered. That I didn't have to earn my right to exist. I made friends, real friends who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. I joined a book club in Cabbagetown, met other writers at coffee shops, reconnected with old college friends. One friend, Jasmine from college, became particularly close. Over coffee one afternoon, she asked the question everyone danced around. "Do you ever feel guilty? For what happened to them?" I considered carefully. Sometimes. There are moments I wonder if I went too far, if exposing them so publicly was cruel. But then I remember the tooth on my bathroom floor. Being told I was trash while scrubbing my own blood from carpet. 3 years of being treated as subhuman in my own home. And I think, no. I didn't go too far. I just refused to be silent. Do they ever try contacting you? Eleanor sent an email about 6 months ago wanting to meet, to work things out. I deleted it without responding. My lawyer told them any contact goes through him. She tried again with a different email. I blocked that too. What about Savannah? Nothing from her. I think she's too proud. Or too angry. Either way, I'm glad. I have no interest in reconciliation. Some relationships aren't meant to be saved. Jasmine nodded. You know what I admire most? You didn't wait for them to change. You didn't wait for an apology. You just saved yourself. That was it exactly. I'd spent years waiting for them to see me, value me, treat me with basic human decency. One day I realized I could wait forever, and it would never happen. So I stopped waiting and started acting. 5 years after leaving, I stood before a room at Haven House's annual fundraiser and told them how a piece of paper with a phone number saved my life. When I walked into this building 5 years ago, I was broken. I believed I was worthless because that's what I'd been told daily for 3 years. I thought escape was impossible. But people here didn't just give me resources. They gave me back my humanity. They reminded me I mattered, that I deserved safety, that wanting better wasn't selfish. After the speech, a young woman approached couldn't have been more than 19, with dark circles under her eyes and a fading bruise makeup couldn't hide. Can I ask you something? Of course. When did you stop feeling guilty? For leaving, for fighting back, for everything? I thought about lying, giving a neat answer with a specific timeline. But she deserved truth. I still feel guilty sometimes, not as often, not as intensely. But there are moments when that voice creeps in, the one trained to believe I'm responsible for everyone else's feelings and choices. The difference is now I recognize that voice for what it is, trauma, not truth, and I don't let it make my decisions anymore. She nodded slowly. I'm thinking about leaving my mom's house, but she's my mom, you know? What if I'm making a mistake? I took her hands. Listen to me. If you're asking yourself whether you should leave, if you're standing in this building talking to a stranger about it, then you already know the answer. Trust yourself. You're not crazy, you're not overreacting, and you deserve to be safe. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me in 5 years when you're standing where I'm standing, telling your own story to someone else who needs to hear it. She smiled through tears. Deal. I watched her walk to Sandra at the intake desk, taking that first scary step toward freedom, and felt profound purpose. This was why I'd written the books, done interviews, shared my story repeatedly even when exhausting. Because every person who found courage to leave was proof that speaking up mattered, that breaking silence saved lives. I was 30 now, with a career I loved, relationships that nourished me, and a future that looked nothing like the prison I'd escaped. I'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and transformed it into something meaningful, something helping other people survive their own worst things. Sometimes I thought about that moment on my bedroom floor surrounded by garbage bags, being told I was trash, how completely I'd believed it, how utterly defeated I'd felt. Then I thought about now, about the life I'd built, the woman I'd become. Strong, successful, surrounded by people who valued me, using my voice to help others find theirs. They'd called me trash, and I'd taken that word, that cruelty, and turned it into fuel. I'd burned their lies in the fire of my determination and risen from those ashes as someone they never imagined I could be, someone who knew her worth, someone who refused to be silenced, someone who learned the best revenge wasn't destruction, it was living well despite everything they'd done to prevent it. I was free, truly, completely free. And that freedom, fought for and earned and protected, was sweeter than any revenge could ever be. They tried to bury me, but what they didn't know was that I was a seed. And seeds, when buried, don't die. They grow,